All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, you said you were listening to a podcast and you wanted to drop a video in the comments that we had done before
Hmm.
on my concerns with psychopathy and how early analysis could actually lead to the improper result because we might medicate it, but it's actually useful in some ways. And you said they had said something in that, so I'll let you set that stage.
Hmm.
Uh, that you sent to me, and that was like, well, she was right and wrong at the same time. So we're going to kind of go over the details of that.
Hmm.
So, what was the podcast and what did they say?
Okay. Well, first, let's start off on a positive note because we're going to be talking about psychopathy again in order to lead into the political stuff we wanted to talk about because,
And I
oh
did want to
boy.
say right off the bat. So, if you're here from that other podcast and you saw the link and you clicked on it, uh, welcome. We're going to get to that first because we wanted to get to you guys. But also, I found out an old friend, one of my best friends from high school, listens to us and talks. So, here's to you, Chivo. Keep spreading the word.
So my wife discovered because I usually do zero sugar root beer as my cocktail, but she saw that Kroger has a Kroger brand grapefruit soda, and she thought, well, you might like this. This makes for a very refreshing cocktail.
It
And
does, but those that are so good like that, they add up,
mm,
which is probably a good thing because then you don't drink as much. But at the same time, it's like great, 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 great. Okay, I'm done. It's like a real savory butter or something where
mm,
like you just kind of you get over it at a certain point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we were going to talk politics, so I decided I need a cocktail, and then I got admonished for, are you day drinking? It's a work-related happy hour, which you go
Well,
to all the time. The fact that you go to yours after work and I'm doing mine during work is not relevant to this conversation.
my I'm done for the day. So yes, it is day drinking, but I am not doing it before work. So
All right. Well, so uh the video in question was Nerdrotic Channel's Friday Night Tights, which is their Friday live stream that they do.
okay,
And
because you said TNT and I had no idea what that was.
oh, that must have been my stupid phone being
Or
smart.
FNT or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I did say FNT. I thought you knew what that. Yeah, Friday Night Tights.
I think you said
Um,
TNF, by the way.
yeah, whatever. Um,
Either way,
probably
so
some. This
so
is
so now
probably
I know what it's
something
from. I
sexual
didn't know where to go
inappropriate.
look to see the comment, but I wanted to react blindly
Um,
anyways. Yeah.
there was actually some stuff that came up after the fact that, but anyway, I'll try not to get a sidetracked. So this gamer slash comic girl that I kind of vaguely knew because I think they'd had her on before, so I kind of sort of knew who she was, and I don't even remember how it came up, but she was made a comment that she's really into true crime and serial killer documentaries and creepy stuff like that, and said that there is a psychopath gene, but that it has been discovered that if you grow up in a good environment, like in a loving family, in a if you grow up well adjusted and cared for and all this, that the way she phrased it was that gene doesn't turn on. And so I threw in a link there to say, hey, and time stamped it of if you want a deeper dive into what she's talking about here, check this out where you talked about the guy who made a serious study of this and did the brain scans and
Hmm.
showed you can actually tell from a brain scan if somebody has psychopathy, and then discovered, oh, hey, that's my brain scan. What the hell?
Yeah, and I think she was confusing two things. Okay, so my argument from that episode that we linked was what 264?
I think so.
Uh I think that's what I sent you. 264. So
Hmm.
for those, it's at the 39-minute mark. I remember that.
Hmm.
39 minute mark of what did I say? Hold on. Yeah, 264, 39 minute mark. So if you want to see that part of what we were talking about, then go there. It's not in the title, so we really had to look it up because it was a secondary to the regular
Mm.
topic. But what she was probably alluding to was the talk on a gene. Let me just bring up the link here. Uh, Monoamine oxidase A alpha. All right, so this is MAOA, which is MAO alpha in kind of vernacular. If you have this gene, then you actually have the propensity to aggression. If and only if you grow up in a high stress, mostly abusive type situation. So if you have that gene, it is more likely to incite aggression out of you. Uh, Reactionary aggression. Now, where psychopathy comes into it is the difference is reactionary aggression is different than just aggression, right? Maybe. So when you sent me that and I sent you the initial response, that was my first thought. But when we brought up when we talked in that other episode, I was talking about this study here, which was the functional neural correlates of psychopathy. And one of the things in here, the reason I brought it up was I was worried about their mapping of it, and
Mhm.
I was thinking they would medicate this at an early age when we actually she should be looking at harnessing it, because just like all other personality traits, there are positive benefits to it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made it through sexual selection and natural selection. So there are positive things that come out of it. Some abstractly positive, like the Viking Raiders were probably pretty psychopathic, but they were
Yeah.
also taking care of their kind. People who know the Nordic regions, they're very resource scant. And so the raiders would go get resources from other places and then bring them back to their families. You have to be a psychopath to go kill women and children to go get the resources and bring them back to your family, but at the
Mhm.
same time your family survives. So there's
Mhm.
an extreme version of why it was positive for that civilization. But here's the less extreme version. If I'm going to go in for a surgery and the doctor is working on my butthole and he's like, man, he's going to hurt later, he's gonna have trouble doing his job
Mhm.
because there's no way of getting around the hurt later to do the right thing now. And so you have to have a degree of kind of psychopathic traits to be able to do that job properly.
Amputation is probably one of the, biggest and most extreme examples of that. And I've
Mhm.
used the Alex Smith because there was a pretty good documentary that ESPN did on him that I happened to catch years ago, and they were advising him and his wife that we may have to take the leg to save the body. That yeah, that sucks a lot. I mean, for a normal person, let alone someone who makes his living as a professional athlete, but we can't get this under control. We
Mhm.
keep having to cut out, and they were already, you know, leaning in that way of what you're talking about us cutting out chunks of his body. You so much so that I haven't talked about this in a while, so I'll reset it a little bit, but he got special permission to go to BAMC, Brooke Army Medical Center, which is one of the main biggest hospitals of the military. So guys that were coming from Iraq and Afghanistan, they would get treated there, and then they would get medevaced to one of the bases in Germany, usually, where they would then be treated more and stabilized to the point where they could be then flown back to the States for long-term treatment. And one of the places a lot of that long-term treatment happened was at BAMC because it's huge and they've got a lot of personnel there with a lot of experience. Alex Smith actually got special permission because it's a military thing to go there and be seen by the doctors there because, as they put it, his doctors had to cut out so much tissue in his calf that they likened it to a landmine or an IED
Mhm.
because there was that much trauma to his muscles, trauma that was caused by his doctors because they didn't have a choice.
So let's put all the bits and pieces together. So what makes a clinical psychopath? Why can we tell from a brain scan what's going to have why they're going to have that trait? So what we do know is there's a serious problem with empathy, right? So they actually have very, very, very low and actually atrophy of the ventral media prefrontal cortex, which is kind of like our feeling other people's emotions, not only feeling other people's emotions, but reading it in other people. So
Mm.
if I look at you and I say, wow, you look tired today, that would be that center of my brain registering your facial cues. They have trouble with that. They have trouble with it in every way. The feeling it themselves, feeling what you're feeling themselves. So you can see someone crying and then you feel sad inside. That would be an empathetic
Good thing
reaction,
we haven't
right?
done anything recently to interrupt children's developmental ability to read faces.
Shh, let's not get sidetracked. We'll get to
Okay,
the
sorry.
politics. We'll get to the politics. Okay. So there's that. So you see someone crying, you feel sad inside. That's normal. Okay. What you do with it, it's that's where the other parts of your brain come in. But just the feeling of sadness from that. A psychopath would see someone crying and just be like, "Oh, that's not normal." Okay, whatever. Whatever. And so but they can but they the misconception is they don't know sadness. So there's the thing that is real. They can see someone crying and not register that they're in pain. But it doesn't mean they don't know what sad is because they know what their own sadness is. And that's where the misconception comes in. So we're going to put all these pieces together to the aggression part, to the murderer part, right? So if I'm a surgeon, I'm going in there and my brain is going, okay, well, I have to expand this, pull this aside, do this, suture that, cut into here, put that here. This is where I do the least damage because the textbook said so. And end result, you're good. Yeah, it hurts, but you're good. And the best ones can fake a little bedside manner in the process, right? That's where the nurses come in. They're usually the compassionate ones. The
Hmm.
nurses are the ones that are like,
Gee, and
I
nurses
know this
are mostly
sucks.
women. That's probably just a coincidence.
Just a coincidence, and most surgeons are men. But it's uh, that must be the heteronormative hegemony. So we're
It's the white colonial patriarchy in us talking.
yeah, that's what it is. But so no, this is a beneficial version of it. But I am causing you pain because I wanted to have sex, but you said no. That doesn't register.
Mm.
So then you get the negative part of it, right? So we have a surgeon and
So
then we
it's
have the
I know I'm
rapist.
causing you pain, but I don't care.
No, it's not that I don't care. I just don't even register it.
Mm.
That's the misconception is
Okay.
there we want to attach the word evil to it, right? Because not caring would be evil. Not registering would be something wrong with their brain. There's a big difference there. Okay, so the empathy lack, that's piece number one. And these are all the things that kind of worked together in my mind after I had initially answered you. Okay, so we have the lack of empathy. That's obviously something a serial killer would benefit from, right? You're talking about true crime uh, uh, talk, but we haven't got to the end result yet because the surgeon has the same thing. There's a positive manifestation, there's a negative manifestation. So how do we get to the negative manifestation? What are the other parts? Okay, so going back to the study that I brought up, they have a lot of excess activation of parts of the brain we call the default mode network. So the default mode network is this group of things, and we actually see some prefrontal cortex in there. It's just not the one we want. So they are also prone to ruminate on their own feelings. This is the misconception is not registering other people's feelings is different than not knowing feelings. They just have an uptick of their own feelings. What am I feeling in the moment? What am I doing in the moment? Uh, and so yeah, we want to say it's not narcissism, but there is a selfish component to it. How do I feel in the moment? And what we know about psychopaths is they have trouble with impulse control. They're impulsive gamblers. They're
Hmm.
sex addicts. They're in the case of murder, they do the thing that feels like the right thing to do at that moment for their own purpose. We've got a very great case study with the best tracker of psychopathy ever was a psychopath being Ted Bundy. He documented his own life and why he couldn't control himself.
Hmm.
And we've got a window into the soul of these people. So you have someone who lacks the ability to read other people's emotion. We have someone who ruminates on their own emotion and puts it forward. And then let's add another layer to that, the fear center. The fear center of the brain. Now we're getting to where the argument actually makes sense, but it's not genetic psychopathy, it's genetic aggression. So psychopaths show enhanced amygdala activation during fear conditioning. So for those that don't know, the amygdala is, to simplify it, the fear center of the brain. If you see a snake, you jump. That was your amygdala reacting before the front part of your brain could. You didn't say, a snake, I'm going to jump. You jumped and then said, I jumped because of the snake, and you post hoc rationalize it. Your amygdala is where that initial burst of fear comes from. And we've got a lot of things where that might be the catalyst to fear memories and where they get located with things like PTSD. But the initial burst, the initial hormone response, which causes you to react, comes from there. Well, so we've got inability. So let's keep putting these together. Inability to read other people's emotion, the heightened ability to ruminate on your own emotion, and a heightened fear response. And downstream of fear is aggression. Because what happens when you see the snake? You jump back and you kill snake if you're in a survival mode. If someone attacks you in the street, the fear response starts the fight or flight response. You either run away or you defend yourself. So now let's go back to MAOA alpha, right? You are predispositioned to aggression. You have an inability to read other people's emotions and to integrate them into your behavior. You have a heightened internal emotional response, and you have a heightened fear response, which bleeds to aggression, and circle it back to your predisposition to aggression. Now, the default mode network plays into that because we have to distinguish between two forms of aggression. There is reactionary aggression and there's proactive aggression. Reactionary aggression, we all understand. A mugger jumps out of the alley at me with a baseball bat, and I immediately jump forward and punch him in the face before he could hit me. We would all understand that as self-defense. Nobody would say you're a psychopath. That's normal human behavior.
Hmm.
Now, ruminating, what's the difference between fear and anxiety? Fear is externally caused. Anxiety is internal fear from your own thoughts. So if we have someone who's predispositioned to their own thoughts about their own feelings, and they can generate fear from within, and then they have a heightened fear response and a heightened aggressive response because they don't have the shut-off valve, and they can't read other people's feelings, you can premeditate action to a fear response, which is what happened to Ted Bundy. He would say, I just like this girl and I want to talk to her and then touch her and then do these things. And oh my gosh, she didn't react the way I wanted. She's dead. I picked up a log and hit her in the head. And oh my gosh, there's other people in the house. I need to hit them in the head with the same log. That's exactly what happened to him. So yes, genetically predispositioned from a stance where the brain was just not right to be a psychopath, but it's also in combination with genetically predispositioned to be aggressive, but that second one is only activated when you have traumatic childhood experience.
And
So we brought that full circle to where yes, she was right and wrong at the same time. You needed a combination of both. And the combination of both is the worst possible combination because it leads to premeditated aggression.
I do think the point about the nature versus nurture, which we hate because it's nature and nurture. I do
Always.
think that point was a good point about this, but we did need the fuller picture because I knew we were talking about this, and for some reason I didn't think about it until we started talking. So now I don't have time to try and figure out who the heck this woman was. I first heard her on the Steve Day show, but I think I've seen her on with Jordan Peterson. It's a she's a psychologist. I believe her primary focus is child psychology, and I heard her a couple months ago. She's got a book basically about the over medication of children, and it's look, let's not ascribe these things to children and immediately medicate them because they're children. They're going to pick up on your adult cues.
Mhm.
So you're going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, is basically what she's saying. And her point was, in much the same way that you don't go straight to surgery, you go to physical therapy first. Why? Well, because surgery is literally damaging your body. So that's where we started was, you know, the psychopathy of a surgeon. There has to be an element of that because sometimes it's necessary. But if you can go to physical therapy, or if I can hire you to, hey, I've got this chronic issue here, maybe you can help me work it out so I don't have to go get cut on. That's good. That okay. Let's take that first step first. Same thing with medicating people is, well, wait a minute, can you get positive results from therapy? Let's try that first.
Mhm.
Let's see how much progress we can make with therapy because maybe you don't need any medication at all, or maybe you don't need as much medication as you might if you went straight to the psychiatrist instead of the psychologist.
Mhm.
It was basically her point. And I know you and I know people like that. I would imagine the three people listening here, you might know someone like that. Like we have a mutual friend who was very ADHD and he was medicated. But
Mhm.
it was we have ranted about the over medication, and that is definitely a problem, which is frustrating because there are those times where now you have someone who is a very successful adult with a very good career because he was medicated just enough to be able to focus,
Well,
but not so much that he stopped caring.
my question is knowing what he does for a living, it's an engineering type trade. Would
Mm-hmm,
he have chosen that profession had he stayed unmedicated? That's the question.
mm-hmm,
For better or worse.
mm-hmm.
For better or worse. He could have been worse off. Could have just not been able to focus on anything and been a deadbeat the rest of his life, or been able to not focus on any one thing but been a jack of all trades in a generalist field and actually be innovating engineering instead of working in engineering. So there's the play here, and that's what I want to kind of the mindset I want to get out there is
Mm-hmm.
there's a positive result to both sides and there's a
Yes,
negative result to both sides. So
yes.
how do we harness that? And so can we identify someone as ADHD at an early age and then guide their education in an open system that allows for innovation versus identifying somebody who's super highly conscientious, uh, like my son is an example, you have to tell him every detail of the instruction and he'll do the best job possible. But if you just leave it open ended, it's like the result is not very good at all. So if you instruct him in detail, he will do he's the best model builder I ever known. It's but at the same time, if you say, hey, build this car, you get something that's kind of got wheels and
Where's my kit? Where's my instruction booklet?
yeah,
Where's
where's
my,
the
yeah.
instructions? Yeah. So he gets that from his mother because obviously he doesn't get that from me.
Oh,
Uh,
geez, when I know that something is complicated and instructions are required and I'm not going to be able to just figure it out, it's honey, here, hand her the
yeah.
instruction booklet. because
So, but at the same time, we've identified that.
mhm,
So he is going to be great in a field that is step one, step two, step three, step four, step five, step six. So he's going to probably he wants to be a genetic engineer. That's his latest one. And so it's like, okay, that's cool. That's awesome. So let's keep playing that. But if he was more like me, why would we push him down the road of an engineer? Because
right.
I would be a horrible engineer because I would be miserable. Not because I can't do math, I can do math really well. Not because I can't do physics, I can do physics really well. But I tend towards quantum physics
The
instead
weird
of
stuff that hurts my brain.
instead of a turbine where the something being off by 1/1000th of the width of a hair is going to completely shut down a plant the size of three of my houses, right? So it's, that's too much precision for me. I like to play it by ear, a little bit, but I'm also
Mhm.
innovative. We need both. We need both, just like so if we can identify this, so I talked about, so further, our first talk, identifying psychopathy is not a bad thing for me, but my problem with it is, what do we do in response? Do
Exactly,
we
and this is
change
why
the environment around them or
mhm,
do we medicate them?
I had to look this up because I couldn't remember. I remembered Peterson talking about this, but I couldn't remember the specifics of the dark triad and
It's
what is
tetrad now, by the way,
and what
tetrad.
is more recent, which is the dark tetrad.
Yeah,
Is
which
they've
is the one of the three that I cannot find a positive manifestation of, which is sadism.
mhm.
Because the psychopath doesn't can put aside the feeling of causing someone else pain, which can have a positive and negative. The sadist loves causing the pain.
And when
That's
you
the
were
only
talking
one that I could attribute the word evil to.
and when you were talking, that's when this popped into my head because you were talking about the the self-centeredness, and it made me think, well, and you said it before I could even ask the question about narcissism, and that made me think of the overlapping Venn diagrams. And I was thinking narcissism was part of the dark triad. So it's Machiavellianism, narcissism, psychopathy. And that was, according to Wikipedia anyway, that came from a book published in 2002 by a couple of PhD psychologists. And then later, what was added to that, the dark tetrad, was sadism,
Mm-hmm.
that there's another element of that. And the reason I bring that up is to your point about, okay, well, what do we do with this? We can do this brain scan, we can do this gene test, but okay, so don't immediately think, oh my gosh, psychopath, we need to medicate this person. Well, wait a minute. What else is there?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is there narcissism? Is there Machiavellianism? Is there shadism? Oh, okay, now we have a problem.
Well, but also, what are you medicating? Okay, so they have this inability to associate other people's feelings and this heightened sense of rumination. Are you medicating the rumination out? Because now you're just going to have a husk of a person that can't feel other people's things and can't feel themselves. What the hell is that kind of life? And or are you medicating to where they have a heightened awareness of other people, which I don't know how you do, maybe LSD or something, but are you figuring out something to heighten that awareness and bring this other part of their brain up? Well, now what do you have when you have a heightened version of that, plus they already have the predisposition heightened version of the other? You're going to have a schizophrenic.
This
It's
this actually segues perfectly into how this relates to politics because one of the thoughts that I had about why everything is FUBAR, effed up beyond all recognition, the FUBAR pub and grill, is because RFK Jr. was talking about this when he was on with Dave Rubin. I think this was like a month ago, and I just kind of accidentally found it because I watched Rubin with Shapiro just because. Anyway, um, but RFK Jr. was talking about the algorithm and how social media feeds this. I don't think he went far enough though, because I think what we're missing about social media is the social part of it. The media was already doing this. It's just that it wasn't as effective because it wasn't personalized, because it wasn't directed, targeted, and more importantly, because it wasn't so omnipresent, because we didn't have it sitting in our pocket. We had to turn it on the 6 o'clock news, right? We had to actively, you know, turn on 60 Minutes. We had to actively turn on Dateline or whatever, right? And then it would it would do those same things. It would feed those same uh base desires, those base functions. It would try and trigger those trigger points so that it would keep eyeballs. It was the sensationalistic headlines have been around you know, since newspapers were invented. Clickbait isn't new. It's just how you access it is new. And what social media did wasn't new per se. It was just that it turned a a a linear line into an exponential curve because uh it put what was already happening on steroids and cranked it up to 11. Be,
Yeah, there's several parts of that because our, now we're getting to consciousness, our perceptions versus what actually is out there. We're talking about in the if we were to use the analogy of bits in a computer, nor uh, Tor Nordtrager, he talks about the equivalent would be like we bring in about 16 bits of information perception wise to the 16 million bits of information that are actually being bombarding us at any given moment. And so what happens with social media is this is where the algorithm comes in versus the news, because the news that you had to turn on and everything was the same thing for everyone. If I turned on Dateline, the national news network, that was Dateline for everybody in the United States.
that's a good point because
Where the
and that is
algorithm
something that
comes
RFK
in
Jr. talks about.
is
Yeah,
it keys in on those 16 bits you take in and gives you more of those 16 bits over and over and over again.
which is where the put where it's the click paid on steroids. That's where that comes
Mm-hmm.
from, is because it's personalized to you. So it's no longer just the general idea of the Don Henley song "Dirty Laundry,"
Mm-hmm.
which is all about the news media and how one of the lines in it, she can tell you about a plane crash with a gleam in her eye or without batting an eye, something like that. But you know, it's interesting when people die. We love dirty laundry. Okay, that was always true, but I think that's a really good point but it was always generalized,
Mm-hmm.
which meant
And so
that
your 16 bits would take in the 16 bits of the information that was presented that you found most interesting. Whereas now you get the 16 bits of what you find interesting over and over again without that general little bit that can leak in when it's lacking something that you normally look for.
there's no buffer,
Mm-hmm.
there's no room for critical thinking because it is geared towards putting blinders on you, or you have put blinders on yourself. So now there's no longer room for critical thinking because everything is being personalized. It's, oh yeah, I totally agree with that. Oh yeah, I totally hate that. Whereas before it was, okay, I can see what they're thinking, but and well, however, there's no room for that. Unless you um and I can't remember if this came up when Rubin was talking with RFK Jr. or with Shapiro. I think it was with Shapiro because he used the Sabbath literally, Orthodox Jew talking to secular Jew, Rubin,
Mm-hmm.
of we really should all take a Sabbath from technology, of 25-hour period where you unplug and you live life. It's like you're around your family, you're around your friends, even if it's not anything remotely religious, you just need that, hey, I need a minute to unplug.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel a lot better even now talking about politics, which used to agitate me so much. Of I have not listened to one of my political podcasts in a long time. I still listen to segments of some of them, but I no longer listen to the whole thing unless I'm purposely okay, what is this thing like the bear thing? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'd forgotten I had this shirt. My wife got it for me a couple of years ago because she thought it was cute and funny, and I should have worn it when we were talking about the freaking bears last week. But this was something that had been kind of poking me and made me go, okay, what the heck is this
Hopefully
about?
not
And
poking you like a bear from the ass
oh
first.
dear,
Yeah, yeah.
oh dear, no, 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 still not gay. Um, that would be my phone call to you. That would be my
You
phone
know
call
what?
to you. Still not gay.
Even in the even in the gay community, I don't think that's much desired. The asshole feeling that they're going for. Yeah.
I
The
don't know what it's in
new
reference to.
new new definition of eating ass, I should say.
There's
It's
there's this, I don't know what he was talking about. I don't care because I don't like the guy, but there's this clip that uh Nerdrotic and Drinker and some of those other guys I watch sometimes throw in there for a laugh, which is Alex Jones saying, "I'll eat your ass." Excuse me?
oh, he's a character. That's for sure.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Speaking of characters, but this
No,
is
no, but
where was
to
I
add
going?
to that, so when we talk about what information you're taking in, if it's curated for you, then they can actually manipulate how you see people, right? So, okay, so everybody was afraid during COVID, right? So the person who spoke out against Fauci, one of the biggest voices to speak out against Fauci, and it's actually one of his biggest motivations for becoming a presidential candidate, is RFK Jr. But they hone in on the parts that would be scary for you because none of us want polio, none of us want measles, none of us want mumps, none of us want any of that the smallpox, any of the things that vaccines are really great for. But he spoke out against something that was happening in that industry, not just the mRNA, but other things with testing on the current ones and the fact that we have like 70 something of them versus the few that were really important at a given time. And that's the taste they put out there. They put that flavor out there, which is the flavor you get. When you get a nice buttery piece of bread, you taste that sweet saltiness, savoriness of the butter. You don't taste 40 grams of fat that you're bringing in, right? So they give you that sweet, savory taste of anti-vaxxer when you, which is all your brain can handle at that moment if you're novel to it. You don't get this is what I'm going to do about it. It's actually about the money in the FDA. It's actually about the money in advertising. It's actually about this and that. And these are the plan. This is the plan I have to take care of it. You just hear vaccine bad because that's if you're novel to it, that's all your brain can take in at that moment. Trump, all you get is very nice people, very fine people. All you
Fine
get is
people
very
on both
fine,
sides.
fine people on
It,
both sides, very fine
ignore
people.
ignore the 20 seconds right before and the 20 seconds right after that half of a sentence. Just ignore
But
that. You
but
don't need
even
to
on
know anything
Biden,
about
all
that.
you get is yeah, and that's all you're getting from that one side. And there's so much more depth to it. This is actually something that they did on Timcast the other day, which I loved because they were pooping, 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 and I want to say it was the guest that said it, but Phil jumped in full bore and was like, "Yeah, I can do that. I can do this thought experiment." And they did the thought experiment of name the best things that Biden has done. And the initial response from Tim was, "Oh, nothing, nothing. I can't name a single thing." And Phil jumped up and he said, "The Chips Act. Chips Act was really good because we needed to bring that manufacturing into the United States.
Mhm.
This was something that Trump actually left on the table while he was in office,
He talked about, but it
and he
didn't get
talked
done.
about, but he
Yeah.
never did." So I can name the CHIPS Act. The CHIPS Act is something I can name that he did that was positive for the country that we needed. Is a little too late, but it was too late because the predecessor didn't do it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so they went through that thought experiment. After he spoke up on that, some other people piped up about a couple other good things. And it's like, that's actually the best thought experiment. Well, you remember way back when I said that thing you didn't like that the person you don't like said, say it in the person you do like's voice. And the inverse of that thing you do, that person that said that thing the person you like, say it in the other person's voice. The
A
thing that
good,
Biden said that you
yeah.
liked, say it in Trump's voice and see if you still like it.
that leads perfectly into one of the things Shapiro said, which then RFK Jr. actually put into practice. But before I get to that, un, I just realized another example of what you're talking about there is the student loan forgiveness, which we again have a mutual friend who every once in a while I check in on Facebook, and like the last couple of times I've checked in, it's like everything I've seen from him have been memes about how great this is and how it's not what you're saying. And then the more libertarian,
He does
especially
know the
people,
other 98%. The
yeah,
person he keeps retweeting is actually a Russian bot farm, right?
yeah, well, let's not worry about that.
It's one of the
The
16 out of the top
the
17 sites that was
the point
Russian bot
being,
farm.
it's a great example of the dichotomy that we're talking about and the feeding of what you want to hear, because everything he's posting is about how this is actually a good thing, and it's not what the other side is saying, because, and on the other side, then my more libertarian friends are posting all these memes about, how awful this is because, and it's like it's this war of memes and nobody is actually talking.
Mhm.
And this is something that
Well, which gets us back to the psychopathic part because there are people
mhm,
behind the scenes doing that on purpose.
and this is what I'm trying to build up to, but I want to set the stage with what's going on right now before I go backwards a little
Okay,
bit,
disregard
which
all after
is
hello. Keep talking.
um so it was kind of fortuitous that I happened to click on this. I haven't watched Ruben in a while, because as you pointed out, he's not what he used to be, which is kind of funny because he's a lot bigger than he used to be.
Hmm.
But for you
Well,
and me, it's
because
like,
he's a perfect example of the term audience capture.
mm,
He
yeah,
started to be very loved by that the part of the right that loves lefties that come their direction,
mm.
and he just kept getting sucked in to that. So yeah,
There-
his perception was these people love me and I'm talking sense and I'm bridging a gap. But at some point he crossed the bridge and there was no more gap, and then he just kept walking.
with
And
Shapiro, it reminded me why I liked him in the first place, though, because um, when I stopped listening to him was when he was editorializing and monologuing. What made him good in the first place was the fact that he was a good interviewer. Like when Rogan is at his best, it's because Rogan asks prescient questions
out of
and
left
then
field
lets
sometimes, and those are the
sometimes out
best
of left
conversations.
field.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes he's great because he asks the question that you, the audience, is shouting at the screen of, "Hey, why don't you ask this follow up?" And he does. And sometimes he's great because he asks something you've never thought of, and you're like, "Oh man, I didn't even think about that." Yeah, answer that question. And then he sits back and he lets the guy talk, or lets the woman talk. He lets the person he's
Yeah, it's
interviewing
for the
talk.
good or bad. There have been people that have talked on it. Like the latest one is what's his name, the actor,
I don't
musician,
remember.
actor, something Howard.
Yeah, I've seen clips of it, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
farting on it.
where
Yeah.
he just goes off and Rogan just lets him talk, and
The
he's kind of the new Kanye West at this point.
the
It's
the the one that actually stands out to me the most, because I've seen people and articles talking about Zuckerberg kind of going under this transformation
oh
recently because of
yeah,
all the he's like a robot or an alien in disguise meme. I think that came because of Rogan, because Rogan walked him right into the noose that he hung himself with,
hmm,
and
which was we were guided by the FBI. Yeah.
he did it so deftly that you could kind of see it on Zuckerberg's face, but it was after he'd already spilled the beans. And then there's kind of this moment in that interview where there's this brief look on Zuckerberg's face where he realizes, oh, I shouldn't have said that out loud.
Hmm.
Why did I just say that? But anyway,
Because of the conversational nature.
so
Yeah.
it because it was a really good conversation, I ended up listening to the whole thing with Shapiro. And it's good that I did, I think, because towards the end, Shapiro vocalized something that I've been thinking, but I wasn't really sure how to say. And you've said too, we've both said parts of these, but Shapiro put the two parts together, I think, better than I've heard before, which is that a big problem with current day, right now politics vis-a-vis the election is that what the Democrats have done is they have put truly radical policies on a benign face. Biden is Uncle Joe. He's lovable. Oh, Joe, you did it again. You said something silly, and they're able to kind of laugh off what are truly, if you just look at the policy, kind of like what you were saying about, you know, okay, you like that Biden thing, say it in Trump's voice. You like that Trump thing, say it in Biden's voice. So if you look at the policies, most of the policies, the overwhelming majority of the policies that are either being discussed or actually enacted, they are incredibly radical. And if you don't ask about the people who are running, if you don't ask about the candidates and you just ask about the policies, public polling isn't what it used to be, partly because it's harder and partly because people don't trust the pollsters. But still, what polling there is that's out there, if you just asked about the policies, nobody likes what's going on. And then if you ask who you're voting for, there's still a big chunk of people say, well, I'm voting for Biden because, Biden, Democrat, Team
Yeah,
Jersey.
and it's
Yay.
it's hilarious because okay, so to case in point, I want to give an example of what you're talking about, the things that are being passed that are horrendous. The FISA,
Mm-hmm.
the FISA Act is a great example where they can basically non-warrant spy on you, right? So that's a great example. But look at the voices that are speaking out against things like this. Uh, Massey is a good example.
Chip
Rand
Roy from here in
Rand Paul,
Texas. I can't remember
Chip
which districting test
Chip
is, but
Roy, yeah.
I think he's south of you. I think
Okay,
he's the Corpus area.
because so we just named three Republicans, right? Let's go. The Libertarian who might be in the Senate next year because he's doing really well in his race is Justin Amash,
Mm-hmm.
who I'm a huge fan of. So we got one that we actually might have a independent senator, which is crazy, right? But then let's give credit where credit is due. The best thing that might have happened to this dude is a fucking stroke. Fetterman. Fetterman is making more sense on Capitol Hill than almost everybody else in the Senate right
Yeah,
now.
holy freaking cow, man. It's like,
I think I think you want to say it's something with his brain or whatever, but strokes have lots of manifestations
and
and
weird side effects
and
sometimes.
weird side effects. And there's different kinds of strokes. And one of the kinds of strokes that might be the issue here is everything that comes into your brain is fine. Every thought you have is fine, but the part of your brain that translates all of that to words coming out of your mouth messes up.
And we saw that in the campaign, and it was like, how the hell can this guy get elected? What, he just spoke a bunch of gibberish.
But at the same time, he could be thinking the right things.
Yeah.
And he could be just as high functioning as every one of us in every other way, except the words don't come out right.
I
But
really
now the
wish I could
words are
have
coming
this.
out better.
I really wish I could have one of those strokes that makes me talk Scottish, because that would be great.
But then add to
Finally.
that the fact that there's also the thought in your head that I could have died.
Mm-hmm.
And that could lead to the epiphany of I need to do better, which, okay, I was a politician before, but now I'm in this place where I can do good things. And
I'm no
my
longer a
legacy depends
pretend
on it.
activist. I'm actually an
I
activist.
am actually an activist. And he is a populist. He was a lefty populist.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting to the point where the divide is actually more obvious that it's populist versus establishment than Democrat versus Republican. And the Democrats are just taking longer to come on board with that because they've had such a
It,
intense system. And
and
I
this
think
is
it's taking somebody who had a near-death experience
mm,
to finally buck that system. And I think when people realize what an impact and how actually people are starting to come to his cause, that might incite some bravery on that side of the aisle because Pelosi has him down with a hammer right now. That, oh, you know what? This is going to be the end of you if you defy us. Well,
mm-hmm,
he's defying, and it's not the end of him.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes it takes that first person to say, "I am Spartacus," and then the next person says, "I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus,"
mm-hmm.
until you have everybody saying it. And
And the flip side to that, and again, why politics is so broken right now in this moment is that Trump is the polar opposite. If you actually objectively look at the things he actually did, Sam Harris, I'm talking to you, even though you'll never see this, but that's not the point. Sam Harris, I'm talking to you. Look at what he actually did, not what he said, and more importantly, how he said it, but look at what he actually did. And this was the point Shapiro made is he's he's really not that different from McCain and Romney. He's a center left Republican. He's
Like I said in the last episode, he's a '90s Democrat.
he's a 90s Democrat or a 2000 center left Republican. It's just that he so he's the exact opposite of Biden. His policies are all very moderate, but it's in a triggering extreme face, as opposed to old Uncle Joe, who's just, oh, Uncle Joe. He's so benign. He's so milk toast. He's so whatever. But what he's actually doing is insanely radical. And that is where we are with the two major parties. Well, how did we get here? Okay. Well, I said this last time, and I didn't really anticipate that I was going to be building off of it, but it's that hopefully one day we will have enough honest historians to honestly evaluate Obama's presidency. But I'm not blaming it all on him because, again, go back to this was already happening in the 80s and 90s. It's just that there weren't the mechanisms to turn it up to 11. One of the terrible things about Obama's presidency, his two terms, is that it happened to coincide with the just meteoric rise of social media, which the beginning was already bad enough because it is very important to remember that he is literally a disciple of Saul Alinsky. Okay. It always drove me crazy that people talked about oh, he's such a great speaker. He connects so well with an audience. And I didn't understand that at the time because I'm Mr. Analytical Left Brain and I'm looking at his speeches, I'm listening, I'm reading his speeches and going, he's just spewing out Hallmark cards. He's not actually saying anything. I didn't understand that that was the point.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, we're recording this out of order, so you're going to see I'm going to reference this when we talk Wheel of Time, is that the reason he overcame Hillary, which again, recency bias, you got to step back from that a second and remember that in 2008, it was her turn. It was her time. She was the presumptive nominee. It wasn't until like halfway through, it wasn't really until Super Tuesday that Obama started to get enough momentum that people went, oh, wait a minute, maybe it should be this guy. Because Hillary is a machine politician. She is Tammany Hall, if you know your history, which was that was New York City in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where it was the real power were the people behind the scenes pulling the strings. That's who she's always been. She's always been a Machiavellian politician. She's always been a Machiavellian uh, uh, stair climber. She's just trying to get to the next step, the next step, the next step. Obama, the brilliant danger of Saul Alinsky is that he took the prince, which, I mean, again, think about the title, the prince. You're born into it. What Machiavelli was saying was, here is how you utilize and maximize your power and keep it and expand it as a prince. You don't actually have to take power though, because you're born into it. What Alinsky said was, okay, well, how do I do that in a democracy? All right, well, now I have to take Machiavelli and I have to take what's his bucket, the French psychologist who, literally wrote the book on mob psychology. How do I turn a crowd into a mob? That's basically what Alinsky is saying is, in order to execute the prince, I first have to turn the crowd into a mob, and then I've got them. And that's what Obama was able to do. That's why if you're a really analytical, capital C conservative, American conservative type person, you're looking at Obama going, he can't possibly get elected. And then in 2012, you're going, he can't possibly get reelected. But it makes perfect sense to everyone who voted for
Mm -hmm. Well, and there's so much behind the scenes that people didn't get, like Obamacare, which was actually very popular, even though the right side of the aisle hated it. That came at a price that we didn't feel till COVID.
That was something RFK talked about with Rubin. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because it came at the price of shaking hands with the pharmaceutical companies that they could basically do what they wanted, charge what they wanted, do what they wanted, have control of the FDA, have control of everything. Now that actually started back with Reagan. So to give equal care, Reagan is the one that's started the funding
It,
from
mhm.
pharmaceutical companies to the FDA to get things done faster. But yeah, that pretty much is par for the course for the last pretty much our entire lifetimes.
All right, and this brings me back around to RFK Jr. And while I do want to talk about him specifically, what I appreciated was more generally his placing where we are in a bigger historical perspective. And it's it's doubly important because if you go and you watch the interview with him and Dave Rubin, he goes all the way back to the Gilded Age and talks about how that kind of became was kind of the beginning of the unraveling of the American system, of the American idea of what government is supposed to be, and the merging, the tangled, incestuous web that became government private partnership, which is the WEF buzzword now, but it's not new. It's just what they're doing with it is cranked up to 11. Okay. And the reason I want to set that stage is because if you've been watching us, you can go watch what RK Jr. says to Ruben and know that, yeah, I disagree with his reading of history, but I appreciate that he's putting it in a historical context. I appreciate that he's not trapped in the moment, which is really where we get to why our politics are so foobarred, is because we are trapped in the moment. Because that clickbait that started decades ago and now has trapped so many people in these dopamine loops that we can't get out of is manipulating us into self-destructive behavior. That's what an addict is, right? It's
Yeah.
I need that dopamine hit and I don't care that I have no teeth anymore and that I'm 80 pounds because I smoke so much meth.
Yeah, but the solution, we got to be careful because just like I talked about with medicating mental disorder, there are positives to this information age. There are positives to this heightened, increased speed of activity that we have. So we have to identify the negatives, identify the positives, and see how we can marry everything into this prospering of humanity from here on out, which I think AI is going to play into that. There is going to be a step taken with that. I all the people afraid of it, they have their concerns are valid to a big degree, but also you got to be careful. Don't throw the baby out with the
Mm-hmm.
bathwater
Mm-hmm.
in the fact that we may need that as a step to get through this bubble we're in, which is everybody has got this curated world that they have coming in. So there's a difference between VR and AI, right?
Yes.
AI is just hyper intelligent computation with the ability to adapt that based on learning. Whereas VR is our input from what AI can do. And I think a lot of people confuse the VR dangers with actual AI. I mean, I'm sorry, AI is not going to make a Matrix. AI is not going to be Skynet to
Not
take
yet,
over the
anyway. Yeah.
world. Not yet. I mean, we're not there yet. There are
And,
so
and
many hiccups in that because we don't even understand the human brain enough to make a artificial human brain. Now we can make a brain that is dangerous to us. That is true. but we cannot make another us that is going to take over us yet. But how we input that knowledge, that's where the danger is, because
Hmm.
we can see with just the scroll up, the scroll up, the scroll up, how
We
easy that can hijack your
do,
brain.
doom scrolling through life. That needs to be this channel's catchphrase.
Yeah, doom scrolling through life. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just catch yourself every once in a while, and you're doom scrolling, doom scrolling, doom scrolling, and what it takes is actually the good creators, because then you get something that engages your intelligence. I bring it up sometimes. I don't know how much on the channel, but I bring it up at work sometimes. The one that brought me out of it was the guy doing cartoon voices for Linkin Park. And I saw that, and it was doing Skeletor for the rapper, the rapper, and Cartman for the screamer in the group, and it completely just jolted me out of that doom scroll, because I watched his entire 3 minute version of the song, and I was like, this was amazing. I'm done with the internet tonight. But then I looked at the clock. I had not been done with the internet for 30 minutes until I hit that video. And then I thought about it for a second, and I was like, in reflection, I can't remember anything but that video,
Hmm.
because my mind was so hijacked by swipe up, swipe up, swipe up,
And I've
swipe up.
referenced this before, but where this becomes very real and very dangerous in the political world is El Salvador. And there's a channel called Task and Purpose, and I brought up the video. I didn't play any of it. I just brought it up to show it a while ago. But Task and Purpose, El Salvador. It's like a 30-minute video on the history of what's going on there, and how the gang problem there got so horrific that they basically elected a populist dictator. And right now, things look okay. But the guy's doing some things that are right on the razor's edge of, is this guy going to turn into just yet another Central or South American right-wing populist dictator? Or is he actually going to be Cincinnatus and say, my term is over, the
Hmm.
crisis is past, I'm done now?
Yeah,
We don't know yet.
which has been one of the things on the right that has been concerning to me, because so many people celebrate this guy because he
Exactly.
cleaned up the
Exactly.
streets and he did all these things,
And
and I'm like, yeah, but he did it in a very illiberal way.
and what we should be pointing out is that this is what happens when politicians who care more about their station and what they can personally gain from their station keep kicking the can down the road.
Mhm.
Because the reason we got to a point where this guy, just Cliff's Notes version, he kind of came out of nowhere. He was not part of the establishment, and he didn't run a traditional campaign. He did not debate. He did not do any debates with his opposition. Instead, he ran a very savvy social media campaign and was elected in a landslide, and then was reelected in a landslide because what he did actually worked and made the
Mhm.
people feel safe.
And the question is he a good doctor? Did he prescribe the antibiotics to take care of the infection? And then when the infection is gone, basically not renew the subscription?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this going to be you permanently taking the antibiotics whether you need it or not?
Mm-hmm.
And is he the good doctor, or is he not? Does he only have a hammer and everything's a nail? Or can he say, you know what, we fixed it?
And this is how this isn't a tangent, okay? Because this is, I started off a second ago saying, and now I'm going to talk about RFK Jr. and we've been talking about El Salvador. What the hell? Well, here's why. My brother and one of my uncles, like, literally called me a couple of times in 2015, 2016, like it was an intervention because they could not believe that I would not vote for Trump. And one of my reasons, and possibly the biggest reason, was this: because of Obama. That's weird. Why? Okay, well, here's why.
Because the packaging versus the substance.
No, no, no.
No?
It's it's it wasn't that. America has been un-American several times in its history. Okay. Take, for example, Woodrow Wilson. I've ranted about him before. One of the Well, two points of information that you need to know about Woodrow Wilson that will probably tell you all you need to know is that one, it was the first screening of a movie in the White House, and it was Birth of a Nation. If you don't know that film, go look it up and have a good time. Yikes. Secondly, people talk about the segregated military, and it was integrated by Truman in Truman's first or second term. I don't remember which. Actually, no, it was reintegrated. Grant, when he was president, not when he was the general, in Grant's presidency, he integrated the military. It was during Grant's presidency that the first black man was admitted to West Point. Woodrow Wilson re-segregated the military. That's how much of an a-hole he was. Third point, just because maybe it has some reflection on today. In his second term, like the last year of his second term, he wasn't actually president. He had a significant stroke, and his wife, you know, the unelected first lady, and the cabinet were basically running the country as president and just putting his signature on everything. Okay. What happened after that? After that, Harding, who wasn't a great president, but he made a good choice in his vice president of Calvin Coolidge, Harding ran on a campaign, the campaign slogan of which was literally return to normalcy. The country recognized that, all right, in the moment, we thought we were doing the right thing, but we went overboard here and we need a correction. And they had Harding, but more importantly, then they had Coolidge, who returned things to, hey, no, America is a federal system that is as much as possible a hands-off system, and let the people live their own lives and make their own decisions. So it was a proper correction towards our founding principles. Same thing with FDR. Everyone loves FDR because he won the war. Okay, well, yes, but he was also president for life, which we recognized immediately after his death. Hey, maybe we shouldn't let that happen anymore. And as much as people loved FDR, one of the first things that happened after his death was we passed an amendment that said George Washington's example of only 2 terms, we are now making law with an amendment to the Constitution, which is really damn hard to do. My biggest concern with Trump was that Obama's presidency was so bad systemically that we needed a correction, and Trump would not be a correction. He would just make things worse in a different way. And that's exactly what we got, because the left lost its ever-loving mind and the right doubled down on the team jersey politics. That's where it brings me back to RFK Jr., is that even if he can't be elected president, if he gets 30% of the popular vote, that's at least a message to the uniparty that we're tired of this. There is a very large chunk of America that is sick and tired of business as usual, and we're not taking it anymore. Okay, maybe we didn't win the presidency this time, but we're here and we're willing to do something about it. And it's not nothing to quote unquote throw your vote away, which is what people on both sides are going to be telling you if you vote for RFK Jr.
So
What?
breaking news based on this.
Hello.
Breaking news. Biden currently not slated to be on Ohio ballot in November, and state lawmakers didn't bother to fix it. Reported by Courtney Weil, and someone posted the Ohio State Secretary of State issued on Tuesday warned Democrats, unless your party plans to comply with the statutory deadline, I am duty bound to instruct boards of elections to begin preparing ballots that do not include the Democratic Party's nominee.
I hadn't heard that. That is
I
interesting.
told you it's breaking news. It just happened. This
Wow.
is, yeah. I normally ignore
That's a
those
big
things that
effing
pop
deal.
up, but I just saw the headline of that and I was like, that might be legitimate for what we're talking about at the
I
moment
am
because RFK is on the ballot
it
in
will be very
Ohio.
it will be very interesting to see what the federal courts of appeals and Supreme Court does with this, because what they should do is nothing, because it's none of their damn business.
Well, but this is different than the Colorado incident where they tried to
Mhm.
remove somebody from the ballot. Is there was the process in place here that didn't
Exactly.
get
That is
done.
why the Supreme Court
Yeah.
slapped them down so hard, is because the 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 right-leaning people on the court said, "Heck no, you can't do this." The left-leaning people on the court said, "Stop interfering with our interference."
Wow, that's intense because Ohio's huge.
That is a big, big swing state. You would think, if this is upheld as it should be, you would think that means Ohio is automatically a Trump, but
No, this
RFK
would
has a
be
lot of
I
working
was
class
about to
appeal.
say this would be the test case to how big RFK was because we're looking
Yes.
at poll
Yes.
numbers. He posted this not that long ago on his own account. Poll numbers, Trump versus Biden, Trump wins. Was Trump versus Biden versus RFK, Biden wins. Tr- Uh, uh, Biden versus RFK alone, RFK wins. Trump versus RFK alone, RFK wins.
Was that
And
national polling or state
it
polling?
was national polling.
Okay.
And his point was, look, I beat each candidate, but if we have just Trump versus Biden, we're stuck with the same old.
Exactly. And that
And
that is my point about voting for him, is sending that message to the uniparty that we're tired of this. We are tired of
mhm,
business as usual. You have turned politics into something that, even if it was wrong, at one point it was at least a symbol of aspirationalism, of son, daughter, one day you could grow up to be president because this is America.
mhm.
And you have turned it into something sleazy and dirty. And there was always that undertone of corruption, but now it is front and center. It is right in your face, and the uniparty doesn't care.
Yeah,
Not a single dollar for the security of our own borders, and billions of dollars to Ukraine and Israel. Forget for a second what you think about those issues in particular, and just think about what that meta big picture says to you.
yeah. While you're up doing things with your family, I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to the Libertarian convention this weekend. Because Trump's going to be there, RFK is going to be there, Vivek's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to finally post their candidate for their presidential bid, their presidential candidate. They're all going to have speeches. I think there's going to be debates. I think Vivek is supposed to debate the vice presidential candidate of whoever they pick. Uh, and I'm actually curious because I've seen a few of the presidential candidates on Pool lately. He's had them on all in a row so that they can plead
The
their case.
libertarian candidates.
Libertarian
Yeah.
candidates, yeah. And so, uh, you would like my favorite of them. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but because he's the actually only absolutist abortion ban person on the ticket. But other everything else he says, I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. Go with that, you know. So we'll see. I'm going to be paying very close attention to that while I'm laying on my belly in my bed. Uh, but I want to hear what RFK has to say while he's there. Because why is he there? He wants a platform to pull libertarian candidates. And he wants to use that platform to also talk to independents because a lot of independents like myself are paying attention to what the libertarians are doing. Why is Trump there? Same reason. Why is Vivek there? Same reason. Why are all these people that have no reason to be at the libertarian convention gonna be there? Because the independent block is 43% of the voting pool right now. Where are they going to lean? I could tell you right now they hate Biden for the
You
most
know
part,
what?
but I can also tell you they hate Trump for the most part.
That's an interesting point, because a point RFK Jr. made when he was on with Ruben is that, and this is strange until just think a little more critically about it, but he made the point that actually my biggest detractors are boomers, my own generation. where I'm doing best is with young people. It's with millennials and Gen Z is actually where I'm doing best. And they tend to be more independent because old people tend to have already made up their minds.
Mhm.
All right, but now give me a second because your point about abortion, there is an affirmative. I'm not just saying I'm voting for RFK Jr. because I hate both parties right now. There is an affirmative case to be made for him, and I need to unpack this because this might sound
Yeah,
weird.
we're getting long on time, but I do want to hear this because I just heard something very contradictory to that text you sent me. So,
Mhm. So, in listening to RFK Jr. in this long form interview, take the time to unpack what. So they went through a lot of stuff, but probably the most interesting, if you want to skip to the end, is something like the last 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. Ruben asked him, okay, make your case first, make your case to the Trump voter of why they should vote for you, and then make your case to the Democrat of why they should vote for you. Like that, obviously not the 20 to 30% that have already made up their mind, but there's a chunk of people that are leaning one way or another
the
that
ones
are
that are like, I
convinced.
voted Biden because he's not Trump, and the ones that say I voted Trump because he's not Biden.
Uh-huh.
That group of people.
Make your case
Mhm.
to each one. And I the what he was talking about and the way he was talking, it suddenly dawned on me that, and I sent you this text, and I assume this is what you mean of what was confusing. Ignore his abortion stance for a moment.
You didn't say
RFKG,
ignore his abortion
I
stance.
know.
Okay.
I
Okay.
didn't say that, but
Okay.
me personally, one of my hangups is some of the stuff he said about abortion. Set aside that specific issue for a second and just listen to what RFK Jr. says about what is important to him and what he thinks we need to focus on and the plans he has for if he is elected, the specific things he's going to do. RFK Jr. is the most pro life candidate running of the three.
Okay. This is the explanation I wanted to hear. Yeah.
And here's what I mean by that. And this kind of just, you know, two separate points just kind of came together in a fusion bomb moment in my brain when I was listening to him. Daniel Horowitz, who is the co-author of my book that you've got sitting back there somewhere, Rise of the Fourth Reich,
Right
about
there.
COVID
Sitting
fascism.
sideways. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Daniel Horowitz has been making this point for a while now, which is that, especially after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the pro-life movement needs to expand. He's been making the point that medical freedom, personal autonomy in this regard, that is a pro-life issue. And he's not wrong. All right. We think of pro-life in just the abortion issue because that has been such a contentious issue for 50 freaking years. Right.
Okay. I get where you're going with this. Okay. Yeah.
But
I got you.
that's not all there is to being pro-life. When RFK Jr. makes the point, let me back up a second. I've made this point before, and I think it needs to be restated. One of the strangest politics makes for strange bedfellows partnerships I've ever seen was I can't remember if this is the first or second Obama term when Glenn Beck and Penn Jillette became pals. Super Mormon conservative Christian Glenn Beck and atheist radical libertarian Penn Jillette.
It's kind of like us, only you're not Mormon and I'm
God
not
no.
radical.
I mean that in the most literal sense. God no. Okay, but Beck made this point to Gillette of, man, so much of what you say, I'm with you, but legalization of all drugs and prostitution, I mean, I can't get with you on that. I can't. Why do you have to make that? And he said, Glenn. Basically paraphrasing, Gillette said, that's just a thought exercise, really, because we are so far removed from what this country's conception of individual liberty used to be that if we started right now, this minute, and again, this was like 2012 that they were having these conversations. If we started right now trying to get back to what this country's conception of personal liberty used to be, maybe maybe our grandchildren could have the debate over drugs and prostitution. That's how long it would take before we even got to that point. And that's basically what RFK Jr. was saying with Dave Rubin when he was making his pitch to both sides. So you're an environmentalist. Why are you so focused on carbon and the Kyoto protocols and the Paris Accords and these big top-down things when the EPA just poisoned the Colorado River? Flint, Michigan, we're still not sure if they have drinkable water because that story went away. Why did that story go away? Why aren't we concerned about that? And he gave a number of examples that I hadn't even heard of look, we can all agree, we can all, left, right, or center, agree on clean air and clean water. And here are some very specific examples where that's not happening. Here are some very specific examples where people, real people, are right now being harmed. Their lives are being
Yeah,
endangered
that
because of
that
things that are happening.
that is something I kind of wanted to bring up today because this is something that is frustrating me with a lot of people in my, I guess, boat. The boat we're in is, and this is something that Ruben is a great example of, is he used to be a liberal. And he could still be a liberal, but he gave up on liberalism. Phil Labonte is giving up on liberalism. Tim Pool is giving up on liberalism. They're embracing the conservative side as the counter to the progressives that are there now. But there's a reason why that was the strategy of the left. The
Mm-hmm.
reason Delgado said liberalism does not benefit us, the ideals of universal humanity, individuality, all of these things are counterproductive to our cause. It's because the liberal scares them. Because there's something the conservative will never have or always has, which is the weapon of the progressive. The conservative always has their authoritarian bend. And the progressive authoritarian can always point to that when the conservative disagrees with them. They can't point to that with the liberal. So we can't give up on the liberal. And that's what RFK is bringing back.
And that was why I
Universal
talked about,
humanity is one of the
yes.
three big tenets of liberalism. Universal humanity. Can this big group of people drink the water where they live? Why can't I compare? Why can't I think about that? Because of your mathematical model of an 80-year progression of global warming? No, these people are here. These people matter, but yet they're going to die and suffer.
One of the another example he gave is, why aren't we talking about the skyrocketing rates of diabetes and how government and policy and big pharma practices are feeding that? That
Canola
is a
oil.
pro-life
Come
issue.
on. Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
That is a pro-life issue. And that is why I talked about the 2015, 2016 and my opposition to Trump at the time, because what RFK Jr. represents is a reset button. Not all the way. We're never going to get back to where we were, in George Washington's first term. That's just not practical, and let alone desirable in all ways, because nothing is perfect, on earth. That's just the way life is, or east of Eden, as Christians like to say. To my conservative Christian friends, there is no perfection east of Eden, but we can at least try and get to that, try and move in that direction as best we can. And that's what RFK Jr. represents to me, is a resetting of the loss of Americanism, just the
Mhm.
general idea. And this is why, so I referenced this before, and I finally finished this Netflix documentary on RFK. And specifically, it was about they gave a little bit of background information, but the focus was on his run for the presidency and then his murder. Okay. And when RFK Jr. talks about that, it's not just a political maneuver to evoke nostalgia and sympathy. There might be an element of that, but the more I listen to them, the more I don't think he is that kind of person. I think he's trying to make a very real point, which is that when his father's body was flown from California, where he was murdered, back to DC, and then it took a train to Massachusetts to be buried in the family graveyard. A trip that was supposed to take hours took days because that many people were lining the train tracks all the way from DC to Massachusetts. It was still the primary. And you think all of these people were going to vote for him in the primary? If he had won the primary, you think all of these people were going to vote for him in the general? No. The point is, there were so many people lining the tracks that the train had to go slowly. That only could have happened if people from all sides of the aisle came together to pay their respects.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that phrase very specifically because that matters. Because once upon a time, we used to have respect for each other because we knew that we're all within these guardrails. We just have different ideas
Mm-hmm.
of how best to get to the same destination. While we disagree on policy, we all wholeheartedly agree with the Bill of Rights. And we
Which
will,
which is funny because when we talk about the Trump saga, we let's circle this back to the beginning of this conversation with narcissists and psychopaths and everything. What would be the number one motivation for a narcissist? Self-validation based on other people's opinion. And what better than a universal respect? So his opponents exactly figured out how to fight him and how to get a reaction out of him. Because why do people hate Trump? They don't respect him. Why do people love Trump? Because they have this ingrained respect for him, that some of it undeserved, some of it deserved.
he cares about me and is going to fight for me.
But the people on the other side have the exact inverse of that. They have no respect for him because he's a racist, he's a bigot, he's this, he's that, he's a narcissist. They throw that term out to use it when you can use his narcissism for good. Because it's like, okay, well, we will respect you if XYZ,
Mm-hmm.
you know, platform, right? We will respect you if you help fix up black neighborhoods. We will respect you if you have world peace. We will respect you if you bring prosperity to the country again. We will respect you, all of these things. All the things he says in his speeches. We will respect you if. And the problem is it was such an environment when he was in there that he was in what can I do and still look good?
Mm.
Which brings us to I already told you I am not, I like RFK. I like all the things we talked about today, but I am not 100% decided yet because it depends on Trump's vice presidential pick in a huge way. There are some I would be indifferent on and I would still listen to the debates and stuff, but there's a big buzz going on that he's going to pick Rubio because Rubio would be him signing the pact with the deep state that I'm only going to do so much. Let me do these things, but this is the assurance that I'm only going to do so much.
We talked about Tim Scott last time. I think that would be the same thing.
It would be similar,
Yeah.
yeah. But Rubio is apparently working really hard behind the scenes to get donors and stuff doing his thing. Where the opposite of that would be someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who is also someone who would shake up the system,
Mm-hmm.
or Vivek would shake up the system. So you have two directions he could go. And if I see the Rubio, I actually believe the rumors then that it is the shaking hands with the deep state.
That Netflix documentary, when I finally finished it, I hated it because it became pretty clear about halfway through, and it became brazenly clear by the end that the point of that documentary, and this came out in 2018, which means they were making it in 2016, 2017. So the modern politics isn't why RFK Jr. is not in there, or anyone from the family, actually. They did not interview a single family member. The reason they made that documentary was to tie Camelot and RFK to modern Democrat politics. That became abundantly clear,
which
and
is
they
the
really drove it home
farthest
by
from the
the
truth
end.
it could be.
Exactly. Which is contradicted within the documentary because they show you why he was so respected, even by people who disagreed with him, which was that he didn't just sit there and hold hearings when he was a senator. He actually went out and talked to people, and more importantly, listened to people. And then he would go to the media and say, this is what is going on in this impoverished community. This is what these people that are being discriminated against are being subjected to. And this is un-American. And and even if you disagreed with what came next with his policy prescription to fix that, the overwhelming majority of normal Americans could understand that, empathize with that, agree with that of you're right. This is un-American. In a country with a GDP this big, we shouldn't have people who are still living with no electricity and having to go to an outhouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's not
exactly.
America. You know, uh, uh, a country that is founded on the principle of all men are created equal should not have this going on in this black community or this going on in this Hispanic community, etc. So even if you disagreed with his policy prescription, the fact that he went to those people and he said, tell me what's going on here. Do you have this? What happens here? What's this like for you? The fact that he went to people and listened to them and asked them questions and then went to the media and advocated for them. Even people who were going to vote against him could tell this is a real human being, not a politician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I kind of want to close on this. But the favorite thing that RFK has said in this whole process that I've heard, I'm wanting to say this was on Bill Maher, but it was on an interview that he did. He said he was asked, "What is going to be the first thing you do when you get in office?" And my favorite thing he said was, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sign an executive order that prevents pharmaceutical companies from funding the FDA and having commercials on TV. That's not my favorite part of it. My favorite part of it was his follow up to it, which was, but that's just temporary. That's to get the ball rolling. I will encourage Congress to pass a congressional law to verify it and codify it in law because I am not a lawmaker. I am just putting a band-aid on it right now. The lawmakers are the ones that have to do it. That was my favorite thing he said the entire campaign trail because part of the problem is the whole executive order round robin thing we got going on where the next president just
Yep.
undoes everything the
Yeah.
previous president does before them. That's why it's so consequential every time we have a presidential election because we're in this round robin
And why it
thing.
shouldn't be, because that's literally un-American.
It
That
is
is not
literally
how our system
un-American.
is
Yeah.
designed.
And
So
so my favorite thing was that he's like, I want to do this the right way. Yeah, I got to put a band-aid on it, but we're going to put the antibiotics, we're going to get it sutured up, we're going to get all of these things as well. So,
so that is a perfect segue into my final thought on this, which is as I was watching this documentary, I had this thought, and then so I kind of got a little annoyed when I listened to him talking with Dave Rubin. Maybe someone else has asked him this before, but if if I had the ability to ask RFK Jr. a question, it would be this. So one of the annoying things this stupid documentary tried to do to tie it to modern racial politics is by pointing out that RFK and JFK were very milquetoast. We weren't sure that they were on our side. We weren't sure they were for civil rights. And they showed a number of clips of RFK basically making the point, paraphrasing here, of, hey, if you're going to be protesting, you need to be protesting for a reason. And you need to make sure that that protest doesn't turn to a riot, because that's un-American. That's not the American way. We speak our minds, we tell our leaders what we're thinking, and we have that protection of the First Amendment, and we have that responsibility as American citizens, but we need to make sure that we are also a nation of law and order. And then they try and twist that of, but then he saw the oppression of the system, and that's why he called down to get MLK out of prison in Alabama. Okay, well, no. What he said there was perfectly in keeping with, he literally made a phone call and told, I don't remember if it was the governor or the attorney general of Alabama, I'm about to unleash the Department of Justice on you, because this is America, and you do not, one, and this is what they did. I believe this was after the Selma March. You do not arrest someone on trumped up charges, and you sure as hell do not convict them and sentence them to hard labor without due process, which is what Alabama did.
Mm-hmm.
You let him free, or I am going to unleash the full might of the Department of Justice and all of the federal authority I have with me upon you, because that's un-American. That is unlawful. And I would love to ask RFK Jr. of, do you ever think about this consciously, and do you make this part of your campaign that, hey, my father was the Attorney frickin' General of the United States, and I spent most of my professional life fighting agencies of the government, because eighth grade me getting Rush Limbaugh's book, and I've mentioned this before, would be shocked and appalled that I'm thinking of voting for a Kennedy. But he's not this bleeding heart environmentalist, anti big business. Most of the, I would guess, I would like to ask him if he has an estimate of what percentage of the time when you were a litigator were you fighting against a private corporation, and how often were you fighting a government agency, the FDA or the EPA?
I was about to say his career is the EPA, basically. The FDA was actually late in his career.
Exactly.
He
That came
made his
later.
name
That
for
came in the
himself with
early
the
2000s.
EPAs. Yeah.
I want to say 2005 is what he said when he
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
started that,
Yeah.
in the interview. So he understands that, no, 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 no. For people on the right, for people like me, he understands that the federal government has become a big part of the problem, if not the problem.
Well, it's the corporate government collusion.
Exactly.
If you really want,
Exactly.
if you want to overplay a statement, okay, so Trump has his good things and he has his negatives. Biden, I mean, I'm sorry, Biden has to go. There maybe there's people on that side of the aisle that you could put forward that I would say, okay, I would vote for a Democrat. A Fetterman, I'd vote for him over Biden, but it's you might be able to put somebody on that side of the aisle. But if you want to look at RFK, he is the most to put forward a catchphrase that has taken the wrong meaning in the last 10 years. He is the most anti-fascist candidate on the ballot because he is the most anti-corporate government collusion
And
candidate on the
he has
ballot.
been literally fighting against that through the legal
Mhm.
system way before he ever thought of running for
So
public
to
office.
use the term correctly, that is where it would be.
Mhm.
So yeah, we can close out. Yeah, I happily and proudly will say I am a liberal. People on your side of the aisle will call me a libtard. People on what used to be my side of the aisle will say you're part of the problem because you don't want to force these things. But I think you brought up MLK, and that's the perfect close because what was the sign they all wore? I am a man. I am an individual, and the weakness of liberalism is coming together and doing something. But we proved through the American Revolution that we can do that. I am a liberal, and liberals can stand up. We can all stand up for the same thing, even though we're not a collection. We can stand up for the same rights, for the same humanity all together. And I think that's the important part because that's what scares the left right now. That's why they put it in their literature that it is not what is needed for their cause, because they want us to become conservatives, because then they can always point to the boogeyman. We don't have the boogeyman. We have individuals all together working towards the same thing. That's what it means to be liberal. And that's where I rest my case.
Well, I feel like we accidentally ended on a positive note, which I always want us to try and do, and I think we managed it there. Uh, totally unscripted and unplanned, but there you go. There's the positive case for, not saying that if you don't, because that would be leading into the trap of the people we're criticizing, is not to say that if you're going to vote for someone else that, you're part of the problem. But if you say, I understand, but okay, at least you understand and you have
Well,
a reason for why you're doing what you're doing.
and a vote's only part of the thing.
Yes.
You can vote for
Yes.
Biden because you believe in most of the ideals of the Democratic Party, but you can also still send messages with your local choices
Yeah.
of how you want that party to
And
progress,
vice versa.
and
Yeah.
vice versa. Yeah, yeah, you can vote for Trump, or however this works out. But what we can't stand for is fake trials. What we can't stand for is the rhetoric coming from both sides. What we can't stand for is the settling of the two-party system. What we can't settle for is all of these other things that surround the good things that could happen in there. And so we have to stand up for the good things and make it clear that that's why we did what we did. And if you can justify it in a way that's not, well, it wasn't the other guy, then I completely support
That's a
your
good point.
decision.
Yeah.
If you said I voted for Biden because CHIPS Act and all of these, name three or four other things he did. Okay, you know what? I don't agree with you on all of that, but that actually is a very compelling argument. I voted for Trump because Abraham Accords and the job numbers we had under his, all of these. Okay, I can agree with that. I voted for RFK because he's bringing in an era that we haven't seen in a long time, which was kind of a golden era. He's new. He's not one of, this is different than he's not this or that, but he is bringing in a new idea that I think would be beneficial to the country right at this moment, which I can name a benefit right now. We have a Republican and Democrat Senate and House. He's neither. So where do they vote on his policies?
Mhm.
Well,
They're
now
going to be forced to vote on the merits. Oh
they're
God,
going to
the
be
horror.
forced to vote on the merits. Yeah. Oh God. Oh my goodness. Right. Because he's going to be proposing things that are independent by nature, because he's not of one or the other. And theoretically, the vice president isn't the swing vote because they are not one or the other. Right. So it brings forth a new era. So if you take that argument, I completely support it. So if you have a good argument for your choice, by golly, you're free to do that. If you're saying it's not the other guy, then it's like, oh, maybe you need to reconsider what you've heard about the other guy or what you think about the other guy. Let's meditate a second. Let's do this.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully that gets those brain juices flowing for all four of you out there who are listening to us, and pass it along. And then next week we will see y'all where we'll talk some physiology, and then we'll
Yeah,
see
this
what
is actually
happens with the
very directly
Libertarian
related because we're
Conference.
going to talk muscle spasms, right? Everybody hates muscle spasms.
Don't let your
But
brain spasm, man.
yeah, but also I'll probably have thoughts because I'm gonna, like I said, I'll pay a lot of attention to the Libertarian conference. I know of a few live shows that are going to be going on. I think Patrick
Mhm.
David is going to have one. I know Tim Pool's going to be there. This might be where they have RFK on, because they said in the
Mm,
next couple of weeks we're going to have RFK on,
that'd be
and
interesting.
they're going to be at the same place he's going to be. So that might have been the tease to get you to listen there, which would be great because I hope Phil's there, because he has a very not that guy approach to him, even though he
Mhm.
agrees with almost everything he says. So I would love to see that kind of play out in a discussion. Uh, but yeah, it's going to be fun, or it could be a shit show. Either one is good news, right? uh, any final thoughts? We didn't give any advice. We don't have to have any
Mm.
disclaimers.
Nope. So we will see y'all next time.
All right, later.